Hey, yeah, the 1960s, happy times, heavy times.
Fritz the Cat was almost a great film. It had potential, it just didn't execute it properly.
Hey, you intellectuals, you think you're so where it's at. Before you fill your minds with any junk and listen to Fritz the Cat, as writers and poets and artists, it's your duty to live life the most. So bug out, brothers, and check out the world and give me a ride to the coast.
Fritz the Cat, released in 1972, was the first animated film to ever be given an X rating by the Motion Picture Association of America. The film is profanity-laced, violent, and full of sex and nudity. It's an exploitation film at its core that hinges on pornography at times, yet it also has artistic merit. First of all, some background. The film follows Fritz, a young college student who has decided to rebel against the norm and live his life to the fullest in the animated world of the 1960s. He meets girls, goes on the run from the law, gets into fights, and gets high. The film is directed by Ralph Bakshi, who is one of the most innovative independent animators of all time. In the 1970s, animation wasn't seen the same as it is today, with it being thought of a medium for children. Almost all animated films were made by large companies such as Disney. Bakshi rejected the idea that animation wasn't a proper art form and looked to create his own animated films independently of Disney. Bakshi knew adult animation would be a hard sell to the public at the time, so his films would be as different, crude, and vulgar as possible. Disney had released The Aristocrats in 1970, which was full of dancing and joy and musical numbers, and that same year, Bakshi started to work on his own adult film about talking cats. In my opinion, Fritz the Cat has so much potential to be better. The style of the 1970s hand-drawn animation is beautiful and different from how animation is done today, giving it tremendous amounts of style. The satire and absurdity of the world around Fritz is an interesting deconstruction of the culture in the 1960s, such as African American characters being drawn as crows, referencing the Jim Crow laws which were enforced until 1965, which helps add themes of race into the story. The film has incredible uses of metaphors, like the scene where Fritz's friend Duke is shot dead on the street with pool balls sinking as Duke's heartbeat slows. Not to mention Fritz himself is an entertaining and compelling character to follow as he navigates his way through the world. Fritz the Cat could have been this brilliant satire on youth rebellion and the culture of the 1960s as seen through the eyes of a cynical young cat. But something about the film is off. The story feels extremely random, full of aimless scenes of Fritz going into hijinks which causes the film to not flow in a satisfying manner. One moment Fritz is having sex at a party, and then he's being chased by the cops, and then he's at a bar meeting new and exciting people, then he's out in the desert on the run, then he meets a neo-Nazi rabbit on a motorcycle. If the film had better pacing and more traditional narrative for Fritz to follow, it would have worked far better. I do see why the film jumps from scene to scene, as it does represent Fritz on his journey to really live and to experience everything. But if it just had more focus, that would have fixed one of the film's issues. The other main issue I have with this film is the use of exploitation. There's so much needless sex and nudity. Out of the 30-something female characters in this film, one of them you don't see completely naked. Now, this isn't me complaining about the use of nudity and sex in film. Sex in film and television can be used in an effective manner to help with story and character, but in Fritz the Cat, the nudity is entirely pointless. It just makes the film feel crude and immature as well as sexist. If the film had one or two scenes like this, I would have no problem seeing it, as it does help convey the sex-crazed, fun-loving anarchist that Fritz is. But seeing as every time a female character is introduced, and not even 2 minutes later they have their clothes ripped off them, it does become problematic. Female characters are one of the major problems in Bakshi's work, with most of them being large-breasted and two-dimensional. So, how do we fix this film? I don't think Fritz should change anything along the technical aspects. The main problem is the script and the way the story is told and its use of shock to gain an audience. In my opinion, the perfect Fritz the Cat film would start off similar. He would be this young, cocky college student, intellectual, who sees through all the crap around him and realises that he is wasting his life at college. He would drop out of school and hit on girls, but the film would have far less gratuitous nudity. Fritz would look for ways to make money and find adventure when he would meet Duke. The Duke storyline is one of the best parts in the film, so I would definitely keep that in. I would expand on that story arc, further exploring race in America and remove the unnecessary scenes such as the whole storyline where Fritz runs off into the desert. Fritz, just like in the film, would get into an altercation with the law and cause a riot. His friend Duke would be killed by the police as a result. In Bakshi's version, Fritz feels guilty for a second at most, and then hightails it out of the area, making the death feel completely meaningless. If the film was to have real emotional stakes, then Fritz would be heartbroken over the death of his friend. He should learn the error of his ways and look to stop the riot from escalating. Fritz should go back to college and share his experience with those around him. The end of Ralph Bakshi version, Fritz is almost killed and ends up in the hospital.
Far out.
Although this might have been able to serve as a moment for self-reflection for Fritz, he instead has sex with the girls visiting him, and the film ends without Fritz learning a whole thing in the ordeal. Fritz the Cat should be about a young man who goes on a life change and world-altering adventure that changes the state of mind and finds that life isn't all about rebellion and adventure. Whenever I think of Fritz the Cat, I always think of what the ideal movie is in my head and how close the actual film is. It has so much potential to be this incredible film filled with the satire of race, youth revolt, bureaucracy, fascism, hippies, college and the 1960s. The film has the animation, the music and the style to be a classic, groundbreaking film, but due to its flaws, it never managed to reach those heights. If the film story just managed to focus and all the exploitation was dialed back substantially, then I wouldn't be making this video. I would have made a different one, calling this film a masterpiece in satire.